Hey there everybody, Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of our RANT series. It's been a while. Today we're going to talk about something that I've been thinking about for, about the last month or so. And it kind of goes back to a couple of the rants that I've done in recent months. Specifically the stinker albums by bands you love, right? And I think on there I talked about, well, specifically one of these bands. But then it also kind of ties into one of the top 10 song shows that I did where I couldn't bring myself to include any of the tunes, even in honorable mentions of this other band from their 80s repertoire. And both of these instances led me to think, it's like, well, you know what, maybe, because I had a lot of people tell me, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't like any songs from those 80s albums from these bands and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, because the 70s material is so great and held in such high regard, not just by me, but by most people. And in some instances, I used to like some of these albums. And then over the years, I grew not to like them so much. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let me just go back and try and rediscover these. So today's rant is all about revisiting the 80s and 90s albums from both Rush and Genesis. Okay, that's my long-winded introduction to this here. So I'm going to start with Rush. And I'm not going to include, obviously, the Moving Pictures album, which kicked off the 80s, because we all know that's a great album. No reason not to dislike that at all. And I almost wasn't going to include Signals, but I'm going to throw Signals in here because I think for a lot of people, most folks I know like Signals, but it's a bit of a drop-off after Moving Pictures. And specifically, I'm going to touch on the albums that came after it throughout the decade. And I'm going to do the same thing with Genesis. Okay, so what I have done over the last kind of like month or two is I have really listened to these albums a lot. And I will say that my opinions on them have softened quite a bit. Okay, because that's what it's all. I'm always into giving albums a second and third chance. Okay, and so let's start with Rush here. So I'm going to start with the Signals album first. Now I've always liked this album, but I remember back when it first came out, we were all on a Moving Pictures high. It was like this, permanent waves of Moving Pictures high that lasted a long time. And then this album came out, and we were all kind of like, wow, a lot of synthesizers and keyboards on here, lack of guitar muscle, but some really, really great songs. And I still think this album holds up really well. Subdivisions, Analog Kid is great, Chemistry is great. Digital Man I don't like as much as I used to, but still a cool song. What else? New World Man. Actually, no, Digital Man is good. New World Man I was talking about. That's not as big a fan of that. Countdown is great. Top to bottom, really strong songs. Again, not as powerful an album as the one that came before, but I still think holds up pretty well. Now, this album I always dug, but for whatever reason, it was like one of those albums that when it first came out, I already moved on to much heavier things, and I think that I never really gave this album its due, although I did like it. Always have. But again, in this little project that I've done here, I've tried to revisit some of these albums here and just really, really listen to them and say, okay, let's do this with a fresh set of ears and just see what's really going on here, okay? And I will tell you, and again, we're excluding Moving Pictures here. I'm not including that in this discussion. I will say, I think this album, Grace Under Pressure, is the best Rush album in that time period. So post Moving Pictures through the end of the decade in the 80s. This is a fantastic album that I think has really held up well. And I've listened to this a bunch of times in recent weeks, and I'm just blown away by how much more I like this now than I did, 30 some odd years ago. Distant Early Warning, Between the Wheels, The Body Electric, The Enemy Within, Red Lenses, just like top to bottom, great stuff. Again, there's lots of keyboards on here, but I think that this album has some really fantastic guitar layers and riffs and solos from Alex Lifeson, who, the more you listen to the guy, the more he's just such a unique player and was really doing some cool things throughout the 80s on these albums. But I think his what he was doing in the production of the albums got a little bit overshadowed by the, what Geddy Lee was putting on with the keyboards and the synths. But some really, really great stuff. Great songs on here. I think, just saying this now, I think this is a stronger album than this one. Just my opinion, based on, and I never would have said that, 20, 25, 30 years ago. But in revisiting these, this to me is the gem of these albums we're going to talk about here. So I've been really hard on these three albums for a long time. I really have. And I got to tell you, I really have not spent much time with these in decades, just because at the time, of course I got them because I was a Rush fan. I was like, man, so much keyboards. I'd rather go listen to Exodus and Slayer and what have you. Change my tune here a little bit. I think this one holds up pretty damn well. And on the Stinker albums by bands you love, I shot all over this one. And I still think this one is definitely the weaker of these two. I always kind of lump these two together. But, this one's pretty damn good. I got to say, I been listening to Power Windows pretty heavily. I'm like, damn. Jesus, why does this always happen? Go away. I'm telling you, I got to learn my lesson. Stop leaving the phone. Stop leaving the phone in the office studio when you're recording these videos. I never learn. Because it always happens. My phone won't ring all day, but then as soon as I record a video, bloop, there it rings. So, in fact, I said it before I started recording. I'm like, take the phone, put it in another room. And I did. Okay? Anyway, I diverged. So, Power Windows. Big Money. Manhattan Project. The Grand Design is probably my favorite song on here. Great song. Marathon. Middletown Dreams. Mystic Rhythms. Motion Detector. God, all top to bottom, really strong. A lot of synths, yes. But really, really good songs. And I really like the futuristic kind of elements that are going on with this album. I'm still not a huge fan of this one, but I've warmed up to it a bit. Okay? I think that there's some really good tracks on here. Force 10, Time Stands Still. This album is probably more melodic, I think, and a little more accessible. Lock and Key's good. Mission, obviously a good tune. Pretty poppy. High Water's good. Second Nature. Solid album. I like this one better. Okay? Because, again, I've always lumped them together. Now, unfortunately, I think this is the worst out of all of them. And I remember when this album first came out, Show Don't Tell was the kickoff single, and we were all like, it's fucking great, man, Rush is back, doing heavier stuff. And then the rest of the album is kind of like, I still find the rest of this album kind of And, Roll the Bones, I think, is a little bit better than this one. That's going into the early 90s, but we're not going to go there today. But some good stuff on here. Scars is great. The title track is not bad. Superconductor, Hand Over Fist, Red Tide. Decent enough, but I think probably the weakest out of all these Rush albums that we're talking about here. So, again, revisiting, still not a huge fan. Like it better than I used to. Really like it better than I used to. The best of the bunch we're talking about. And really, really has grown leaps and bounds in my eyes. And this one, probably not as, I don't like it as much as I think I used to back in the day, but still like it a lot, okay? So let's move on to Genesis, right? So, I've always been of the opinion for decades and decades that after the Duke album, which I like quite a bit, Genesis totally went down the tubes, and while they had some good songs here or there, most of those albums are pretty crappy and purely dominated by Phil Collins's sense of pop and, Tony Banks wanting to be more mainstream and yada, 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 yada. And, Mike Rutherford doing his Mike and the Mechanics thing. All these other elements have kind of bleeded into the music of Genesis. And while I always own these, I never listened to them. I never thought there would be a reason to ever listen to them again. As far as Genesis is concerned, it's the 70s stuff and that's it. Okay? And while I still feel very strongly about the fact that Genesis's best material came in the 70s by far, these albums just aren't so bad. They really aren't. So I just really, really, in fact, I think I dived into these even deeper than the Rush ones. Because I think even the Rush ones, even though I had mixed opinions on them all throughout the years, I listened to them a lot more than these back in the day. So let's start off with Abacab. Pretty good album. I mean, I always like the title track. No Reply at All is just kind of like a cool, kind of funky, poppy number that I just always dug that tune. It's just so different from what they did back in their heyday. But Me and Sarah Jane, Keep It Dark, cool tune. I like Keep It Dark. Dodo and the Lurker is great. Who Done It is cool. Man on the Corner. Just gotta love it from a perspective of just such a great Phil Collins vocal. Like It or Not, another record, solid tunes. I think a very solid album that, a good continuation from what they started on the Duke album, I think. Yeah, it's commercial, but I think it retains enough of those late 70s elements that rank it for me a lot higher than I used to. So I'm giving that one a very solid thumbs up. The self-titled album, I'm going to say the same. This is actually a pretty damn good album that, again, I just kind of cast away. And, Mama is a great tune. Always like Mama. That's All, kind of more like a Phil Collins solo tune, but it's got some cool Banks keyboards on it. It's got an irresistible melody. It's catchy as hell. Home by the Sea is great. Love Home by the Sea. And Second Home by the Sea. Illegal Alien, yeah, it's kind of fluff, but it's catchy. Taking It All Too Hard, that's kind of a sappy ballad, so I'm not big on that. Just a Job to Do is fantastic. I had forgotten how much I liked that song, and I just kind of like cast it aside for all these years, and man, it's a great tune. Silver Rainbow, It's Gonna Get Better, decent enough. I think this is a pretty solid album, so I'm going to give this one a thumbs up too. All right, here's where it starts to go down the tubes a bit, but, Invisible Touch, it's got its moments. The title track, again, give him credit for writing a good tune. It's a pretty kind of, catchy pop number. No prog there at all, right? Tonight, again, probably better as a Collins solo album, or solo song, I should say. Catchy for what it is, all right? Land of Confusion is great. No denying that. That's a great tune. Again, none of this is really prog, right? This is just good 80s, rock. It's basically what it is. In Too Deep, yeah, more ballad stuff. Anything She Does. Domino is fantastic. I had forgotten how good Domino is. Love that song. I can listen to that over and over again. Throwing It All Away, another well-crafted pop tune. And The Brazilian, another pretty solid tune. So, an album full of hits. This was an enormous album for them. It's a good pop album. For me, the Land of Confusion and Domino standouts, and that's probably as close to forget vintage Genesis. That's probably as close to like late 70s Genesis, very early 80s, that you're going to get on here. The rest is just, mid 80s pop, and very well done, or is this late 80s actually? An album brimming with hooks and all that kind of stuff. So not terrible. Oh, are you going to compare it to Lamb Lies on Broadway? No, certainly not. I'm going to make an exception here and go to 1991, just because I had one left, right? So this one, this one's pretty not fucking good. A couple good tunes, though. No Son of Mine is a great tune. Jesus, He Knows Me is fantastic. What else? I Can't Dance, the title track. Well, that's actually not the title track, but close enough. Is awful. And what else is on here? Yeah, Hold On My Heart, Way of the World, Fading Lights. This is mostly a forgettable album. This is like, when most people talk about Genesis turds of the latter part of their career, you can point to this one as the main offender. And, I've really tried, I found a lot to like in these. Not a hell of a lot to like in this one. A couple. maybe, 4 tunes, 5, if that, because there's a lot of there's 12 songs on this. Just a lot of kind of pop drivel on this. And I think the thing that's such a drop-off is that at least this one has memorable hooks, and all the tunes on here are pretty memorable. This is like, a couple, most of it's forgettable. I think they're on their last legs here. So, pull the plug or put the pin in it, whatever. Would I love to see the guys get back together and do another album? Sure. I'd much rather see a reunion of the classic band, but that ain't gonna fucking happen. So anyway, thanks for listening to my little rant here about revisiting what I formerly thought were some kind of subpar albums from Rush and Genesis, and actually some good stuff to be found there. Do they compare to their classic albums? No, but not as bad as I have thought for so many years. I know some of you are going to be like, oh, Pardo's lost his head. How can he even bother talking about these when there's albums like, Fly By Night and Wind and Wuthering and Selling England by the Pound and, Hemispheres. And yeah, I get it. I love those too. These don't compare. But the point of this whole rant is to just say, you know what? I gave these another shot, and there's some good stuff here. Classic material, maybe not, but plenty of good material here. And albums that I think, or at least most of them anyway, that each band can be proud of. So anyway, this is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on the mighty YouTube as often as possible. We got Steely Dan Top 10 Songs coming up tomorrow. I'm going to do a question and answer show this weekend. If I can fit it in, don't know if I'm going to be able to. I'm going to do a Whitesnake Top 10 Songs, but we'll see, because I've got to seriously put some thought into that, because that is going to be difficult. As you know, I am a huge fan. They've got so many great albums, and it's going to be tough, I tell you. Anyway, that's our rant for today. We'll see you real soon, guys. Take care. Bye-bye. And stay warm if you're here on the the West Coast, upper Midwest to the East Coast, because it's damn cold here. Woo! See ya.